Hello and welcome to another episode of Under the Hood. Um, for anyone who's just newly tuning in, every Friday at 4 Central, 5 Eastern, here on my Facebook profile, we will be looking at some amazing people who happen to be my friends, the high profile artists that they are, and talking casually about the struggles and challenges and aha moments that we all have faced in our sort of journey to learning how to sing well. Today, I am very, very excited to welcome my guest, Kimberly Gratland James. So let's see if we can get her in here. There we go. Welcome.
Well, hello.
Well,
I was
hello.
trying to post this to my Facebook.
Oh yeah, please
page,
do.
and
Please share away. In fact, that's a great idea. I
well,
too am going to share this to my fan page,
but the
and I
problem is you're
encourage anyone
talking.
else who's.
That's very.
Oh well, yeah. You can mute the speaker on that, so that way we don't get the echoey.
That would be nice, huh?
Yeah, we're all
Well, how are
trying
you
to
today?
find ways. I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. I'll be doing better once I can. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. We have to mute all of the things so that when we um, share now, share to a page. That's what we want. My goodness. Sometimes the interwebs move a hair slower than uh, where I want them to go,
Well,
but
we've
that's
been
okay.
learning a lot about that lately, haven't we, Weston?
Oh my gosh, we have indeed. Kimberly and
Yeah.
I. Well, let's go back in time here. We first
Okay.
met in
Shh. Don't say
graduate
it.
school. I wasn't going to say the year. We met in graduate school at the Indiana University. Go IU. Um, and yeah, we have very thankfully maintained our friendship throughout the years, which has been so great. But yes, we will get to this later on in the conversation. But we have recently done a great deal of research in trying to figure out how best to not only have conversations like this online, but also to sing online. Kimberly and I are both teachers of the human singing voice. And so figuring out ways to decrease latency, which, is a pretty fancy word, but basically lag, um, in the video and audio sectors has been a project of many who have actually done a lot in a short period of time and really upped the whole idea of virtual online lessons. So, but let's go back. Let's go back.
Okay, sure.
Before we met, you, I assume, had some sort of life. From what I understand, you did your undergraduate at Rice University. Is this true?
No, that is
This is
not true.
never mind. I like to make things up from time to time. Where did you receive your undergraduate education?
At Texas Christian University.
TCU. Someone in your family went to Rice. Was it Creighton?
As did I.
Okay, so okay, see, I'm just getting them mixed around a little bit. Can you please, instead of me continuing to put my foot further in my mouth, um, you did your undergraduate at TCU.
Yes,
Um,
that's correct, Weston.
nailed it. Where did you go after that?
Well, and the interesting thing about college is that I didn't actually graduate with a music degree at all.
Okay,
So
what did you
I
study in undergrad?
well, I was pre-med to start, but I finished with a degree in psychology, even though I was actually working more in politics. But I was singing in choir the whole time, and happened to be at my parents' church in the Woodlands, Texas, just north of where you live.
Mm-hmm.
And the organist at the church was a doctoral student in organ at Rice University, and he said, you should audition for their master's degree program. They've taken people like you before. And 3 weeks later, I was a grad student at Rice University taking graduate level coursework along with freshman written theory.
Okay. And
Weird, huh? I
well,
grew up a pianist. I grew up a pianist, so that's why that it was just a smoother transition for me musically.
oh wow. Okay. And then
Yeah.
after that?
Yeah, and so then I went to Rice University. Creighton was actually doing his undergraduate degree there. And yeah, studied with William Murray,
Mhm.
fantastic baritone. And then after that, Creighton and I both decided to attend Indiana University, which is where you and I met.
And what degree plan were you enrolled in at IU?
At first, I was in the performance diploma program. I was provisionally accepted into their artist diploma, but that was a lot of recitals that
Yeah.
I didn't really want to do at that time because I was preparing, of course, for an operatic career.
Mhm. And you stayed through at Indiana for how many years?
I'd say all in, I think it was 6 because I did 2 on the performance diploma and then 4 years of coursework on the doctorate as well.
And you have your DMA from IU, right?
Mhm.
I
I
nailed
do.
that. I got that one right without any
You
kind of
did.
okay, thank God. Now, another thing that I want you to talk about is that you have a certificate in vocology.
I do.
Can you
Yes.
please talk a little bit about what vocology is and where you acquired your certificate and what was involved in that?
Yeah. So vocology takes a kind of a vocal health perspective, so a habilitative approach to singing, and it blends, I would say, the arts and science of singing and teaching singing together. So, um, it was interesting after having taken doctoral level coursework in pedagogy under Paul Kiesgen.
Mhm.
Um, when I saw that I was going to need to take a doctoral level pedagogy class with Ingo Tietze, I was like, well, I've already had that class. I'm not sure I really need it.
Uh-huh.
Um, I mean, maybe I wasn't quite that obnoxious about it, but I wasn't exactly. I didn't really know what I was in for. But anyway, his class, Principles of Voice Production, was a fantastic course. I think I slept maybe 4 hours a day for the 3 weeks that I was in that course. Lots of math, lots of physics. It was really intense. And
Wow.
then the next modules that summer focused on instrumentation, um, vocal habilitation. So, again, keeping voices healthy, not necessarily trying to rehab voices, because as voice teachers, we're typically not trained in rehabbing voices, though we may sometimes be in that position to maybe have to assist in that process.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so I did that in 2008 when it was still housed in Denver, and it was, a magnificent experience.
Wow. That's awesome. So all of this, well, first of all, let's just say how cool is that that you kind of started pre-med and psychology, and then like the last bit of education that you actually received formally incorporated a great deal of that science into it. So that's really cool. But of course, along the way, like you said, you're sort of in pursuit of a performance career, which I remember very clearly that when we were students at IU together, so you did a couple of summers as an apprentice in Chautauqua, if I'm not mistaken.
I did one summer as an apprentice in Chautauqua and then went back, I think the following year as a principal.
As a principal artist.
Um, mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to I mean, Indiana is such a huge school, and I think that, for those of us who were in the close-knit friendships that we were in, it's been very, interesting and exciting to see all the different paths that people ended up choosing and sort of going along. So talk a little bit about your performance career out of IU and some of those highlights, and then what led you into academia.
Mhm. Um, it was interesting when I first got to Indiana University. I didn't feel like a lot of people were were doing young artist programs at that time. They didn't necessarily, that wasn't necessarily a huge thing. But of course,
Well, let's say
as we were there,
this is
they were
before Yap Tracker.
way before Yap Tracker. Oh my goodness. I don't know about you, but I used to create these crazy spreadsheets, with all of these, deadlines and due dates and this one needs 4 arias, this one needs 5, you have to have 3 letters of recommendation, all that sort of stuff that, I would track, and we were
Yeah.
using different forums to try and gather our information. But anyway, I had some really great young artist experiences, both at Rice University, and then when I went on to Indiana, after a little bit of very focused work with Ms. Kukuro, my teacher. So I actually didn't do a program the very first summer after I started working with her. And so I would say I was having a relatively successful young artist career, and doing some gigging around as well with orchestras and just whatever I could kind of get involved in. And it was after a particularly productive summer, actually, with Santa Fe Opera, that I decided that I wanted some balance in my life, and I wanted to be a little bit more in charge of my worth as an artist. And so I decided I was going to finish up that doctoral coursework. I was going to apply for teaching jobs and have a baby.
There you go. Now, did you
And
do?
so I
So
did.
you mentioned we talked a little bit about Chautauqua. You mentioned Santa Fe.
Mhm.
Were there any other apprentice programs or young artist training program type things that you did along the way?
Yeah, definitely. It was all summer stuff, but I was at Tanglewood one summer,
Sure.
Brevard one summer, Opera Theater of St. Louis 2 summers, um, Santa Fe one summer,
Yeah.
Chautauqua a couple summers.
Yeah. So well on your way to. I think everyone would call that like a very impressive resume of young artist training programs in a variety of different tiers, which is really important. But at what point did you get married in there?
It was a year after I finished my master's degree.
From Rice.
So Creighton and I showed up at IU married.
Right. And I remember that. I just didn't know how long it had been. So, right, you get to a certain point in your life slash career that you want to be more in control of it, and you decide that you would have more. I don't want to say success, but let's say the world itself is built a little bit more supportively to have the security of a academic teaching position, which ideally you could still pursue performing. And well, you have.
Hmm.
So it's kind
Well,
of a
it's still a very important component of your work as a faculty member, actually. Um, Usually at least 30% of your job is expected to be creative activity,
sure.
or research. And so, luckily I've been able to really stay busy performing.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, from afar, it's just you've always been on my radar ever since we became friends. But even more so, it's just like I always hear your name and see your name and face doing things and singing stuff and teaching, and it's just it's great to be able to talk casually about this stuff. So you mentioned you study with Kukro and you study with William. Sorry, what was his last name? At Rice.
William Murray.
Murray. Okay.
Oh my goodness, for a second there, my brain went,
Huh.
oh.
So you never really had formal lessons at TCU at all? You were just in choir?
No, I took some lessons, definitely.
With who?
Mhm.
Or is that no name shall be used?
No, it just was never a very consistent
Okay.
or positive experience because I wasn't a major.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. So
Mhm.
once you got into the program at Rice, these were your first sort of formal lessons in a music degree, and so
Mhm.
do you remember? I mean, what were some of the technical challenges and struggles that you were facing at that time, um, trying to figure everything out here at a very competitive program where I'm sure that everyone else had a little bit of a leg up, as far as just being, if they had 4 more years of formal lessons or whatever it was. What were some of the things that you kind of road bumps, sort of so to speak, that you experienced while at Rice?
I think it was just, a lack of knowledge, of repertoire was a big hole, and, still something that I'm catching up on even today.
Hmm,
Um, I knew a lot of choral literature, I knew a
sure.
lot of sacred literature, um, piano repertoire, but in terms of really knowing the vocal literature, I was pretty, oblivious. So for instance, when I was doing undergraduate, scholarship auditions, because I did audition for scholarships, uh, at a few institutions, um, one of my pieces was "Steal Me, Sweet Thief"
Aha.
for freshman voice auditions, okay?
And at this
And
time,
then
I assume you were singing as a soprano?
mhm, mhm,
Mhm.
yeah. And I had some lessons. It wasn't like I didn't have training, but, that is not, a piece that we would normally assign to a senior in high school.
Sure.
And then, even when I was auditioning for Rice University, I had been taking some lessons with my choir director, my beloved choir director, Ron Shirey.
Sure.
And one of my pieces, I was singing some of Delilah's arias because I think Fort Worth Opera was getting ready to do Samson and Delilah,
Mhm.
and Suicidio from La Gioconda. I'm pretty sure I
Sure.
auditioned for Rice University with that.
And this would have put you at,
And
like, what, like 21 or something?
mhm,
20, yeah,
yeah.
solid.
And then I had also worked my senior year on Depuis le jour, um, down a whole step, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I just didn't know how things worked.
Sure,
I was
sure.
just very naive.
Technically, though, you had the experience of singing in a choir. Maybe talk a little bit about, your experience then, but also the information that you have now that really differentiates between a healthy technique that might be used and acquired from choral singing
Mm.
and, what, as a solo singer, those differences might include. 'Cause I mean, sure, that's probably one of the bigger things that you started to realize with the majority of your experiences in choral singing, and then getting into the master's program at Rice and jumping into private, formal lessons, learning how to use your solo instrument. Um,
Yeah, I think the sopranos and the tenors always have it hardest. Um, I started to become pretty uncomfortable in soprano choral tessitura.
mhm,
So just kind of the that range where you just kind of hang out for people who don't know that word. And so I think even my senior year of high school, doing the Texas All-State auditions, I auditioned as an alto one. And then I think in college, I started off as, again in the soprano section, but my choir director heard a certain timbre that wasn't really consistent with the rest of the soprano section,
mm,
and then moved me down to alto. So, I've had some going back and forth between that. Ended up being moved from the alto section up to soprano section later for an Episcopal church gig position
mhm,
in Houston. That was really challenging. Thank goodness Chad Shelton was in that ensemble for a little while. And that was like the only time it was ever kind of comfortable singing in that tessitura.
mhm,
So, I think a lot of it just really depends on what voice type you're singing in choir as to maybe how close to normal, you can sing.
mhm.
Um, because as an alto, I typically have not felt that I've needed to make too much of a change to my sound
Sure.
in order to participate in a choral ensemble.
Good.
Um, I think that what helped me most as a choral singer and also as a pianist is just reading vertically and learning how to sing harmonically
Mhm.
and learning how to blend and maybe change timbre a little bit has been helpful for me. And then even at Indiana pursuing opera, I was singing with an early music ensemble,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
and that actually led to some really high level gigs singing very modern music, but maybe with no vibrato.
Uh-huh.
And so, I've just always kind of been able to do that. And it's not something that's really messed with me too much. Technically, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so
Well, you're
I'm not
probably
necessarily
I would
against
s
it.
I would say that you're the rare chameleon who can kind of allow for that shifting to happen and still have a very healthy, very beautiful, very natural sound. You know, usually people do one or the other really, really well, and for you to be able to kind of jump in and out, that's really impressive. Um, so you mentioned Connie Kukro at Indiana University. Um, what would you say if you were to summarize, the things that she helped you realize about your voice? Maybe some of the things that she instilled in you about maybe healthy principles of singing, or were there any things that she had to correct that you were doing when you got there? What kind of hurdles did you find working with her?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I feel like when I got there, it was a complete rebuild.
Hmm.
So starting around what age 25, I had to rebuild my voice. Now, I think there are a lot of people who would assume, okay, well, you got into Indiana, you had an assistantship coming in, you were in, Miss Kukuro's studio, you must have been perfect. No, I felt like, kind of felt like a mess and a bag of tricks, and that's partially why I wanted to go on for further education is because I felt like there was still so much to fix
Yeah.
and still so much to learn that I hadn't learned so far. And so, thank goodness I ended up with her. She taught me everything, and I would say that my teaching and singing to this day are still very heavily informed by what I learned from her across. I mean, whether we're talking about alignment principles, breathing ideas, support, this elusive term of support, chiaroscuro, all of it.
Well,
It's
get
very
into it. Get
firmly
into it.
rooted in her teaching.
Yeah, get into it a little bit. I mean, you mentioned support and breathing. I mean, what things were you doing before that you had to completely rebuild and relearn when it comes to support, for example?
Um, I don't know if it's because I was working with a male teacher or maybe, and I don't know if I necessarily did a lot of observing lessons,
Mhm.
but Mr. Murray, certainly never, touched me. So he would just ask, "Are you supporting?"
Mhm.
Yeah, of course I'm supporting.
Yeah, well, I
And
think.
I yeah, and I really kind of thought I was, and I probably had heard all of the, typical stock stuff you hear when you're working with teachers and choral directors, and they all spend time talking about these things.
Sure.
But it's just finding that person and that approach that really unlocks your most reliable, most efficient, most beautiful, or whatever, most powerful, whatever you're going for. It's finding that approach and that person, that teacher to guide you through that process of building that,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what else do you want to know about that?
Well, so you say, Miss Kukuro had more of a hands-on approach, so she
Mhm.
physically being able to direct you to the area of the body that should feel engaged, um,
Mhm.
what other ingredients of her teaching, do you I mean, you say all of it, but like I said, I just want to, I'm sure our listeners want to hear a little bit more detail into the different things. Like, I mean, I'm sure when I look back, for example, I remember for me, when I transitioned from IU to Juilliard, when I started working with Stephen Smith at Juilliard, his his principles talking about refinement of vowels blew my mind. The idea that how we choose to refine the vowel is what determines the timbre of our sound. Uh,
Mhm.
it completely, you know, redefined singing to me, because for so long I had been taught to sing with a natural technique, to just sing very primal, to sing very, spontaneously. And when I would do that, and I spoke a little bit about this on an earlier episode of Under the Hood, but I have a very twangy kind of Houston accent. And if were just getting to know me, you wouldn't necessarily maybe assume that I'm an operatic baritone, and because I don't go around talking like this all the time. And thankfully, I think for everybody's sake, but that for me, like this idea of being able to refine a vowel that can then change house to house, and that we can then choose to sing with that type of refinement. It completely changed my whole way of thinking. I mean, that's just one ingredient, but in addition to Kukuro being more hands-on and showing you,
Mhm.
no, 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 that's not a low breath. This is a low breath. This is
Mhm.
where you need to feel it, right? What other types of things did you find that were really like the asterisk kind of moments?
Instead of maybe just having a couple of very basic kind of vocalese type exercises that maybe a teacher would take you through to get you ready for the repertoire
Hmm.
portion. Instead, she has very specific exercises that work on very specific things or specific skills. And what I really appreciated about it was that not every exercise is something that you do through your entire range. So here, there were some exercises that were really good for middle voice and really, getting I guess the core of the sound built. She's
Hmm.
all very much about singing, on the breath, on the body, but with, a very well formed core that sound that's always there, always present, whether you're singing soft or loud or somewhere in between. Um, and so she really has effective exercises for dealing with a variety of things. Certain things that made high notes incredibly easy, or low notes, or uh, registration challenges. But for
Ooh,
me, it was mostly about support. It
support.
was mostly about taking that breath in and learning how to manage the exhalation.
Yeah. You mentioned registration challenges, and I'd love for you to talk in detail about this, because,
Mm,
the biggest difference between male and female singing is that, in the male voice, we take our chest voice all the way up, right? So we're not really dealing with the type of switching of registrations that the female voice does. And I would love to hear from you. What were your challenges as a singer with your registration? And then also as a
mm,
teacher, and through the exercises perhaps that Kukuro showed you,
sure.
now as a teacher, what what exercises do you use to help female singers strengthen that transition between chest voice and head voice? Um, you know, Talk a little bit about that in detail.
Sure. Well, I don't know if you can see that Rochelle Junk is on right now, but
Oh, yeah, she said,
she'll
"Hi,
be
guys."
so she'll probably listen in on this one because she's actually been a real big help in that process, even more recently. So what I what I discovered was that I was shifting into chest voice very low. Um, and just kind of naturally when like I just didn't really think much about it. I always had a very easy low. Um, but I didn't really think much about where I was shifting or how much weight I needed to have. I just did it where it just kind of naturally felt comfortable. And around that time, it was probably B flat three,
Mhm.
maybe C4.
Mhm.
And so then when I started working with Miss Kukuro, she has an exercise that she attributes to Dale Moore, another prominent teacher in our field. And it's basically an octave and a fifth. And you do it kind of in a, starting like middle voice, say A4, then you go down to A3 and then go up the fifth. And the first time you go down the octave, you basically just touch it in a very light, heady sort of sound. And then the second time through, you switch into a chest mixture, and then work on diminuendoing back up to the octave. And so what was really helpful for me was using that exercise, going actually pretty low with it, so that I could then at the fifth start working on registration choices from either being very fully in a chess mix or being what's still in principle a chess mix, but much more, I guess you would say, lightly mixed,
Mhm.
um, or just not as loud and full. Um, there's some very interesting research by Christian Herbst and his group out of Austria that talk about glottal quadrants and this kind of idea of having an abducted, so kind of a breathier chest production capability, and an adducted chest capability. And then there would also be the same for the head voice, or as the scientists call it, falsetto.
All
So
in
that
an This would all be in an attempt to smooth that transition between chest and head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and what was really great about Miss Kukuro is that she wanted a very kind of lean and mean approach to the middle voice, probably a little bit more, kind of, speak and sing, so maybe a little bit more natural, but that's probably an simplification.
Mhm.
But, say, "Ah," sing, "Ah,"
Mhm.
kind of thing, which, works, I think, very well, particularly for lyric voices. What I started to realize, and maybe this was just kind of this, and I started hearing, oh, you might be a dramatic voice kind of in my late 20s, early 30s. And then
Mhm.
I started having kids, and so I don't know how much hormones and all that other kind of stuff went into kind of affecting maybe registration challenges and also my repertoire. But what I realized was that this exceedingly lyric technique was no longer helping me get it done from probably E flat 4 through about A4.
Okay.
And I started to develop more of a whole by essentially trying to force head voice maybe too low
Mhm.
and not having enough balance from the chest mechanism.
That word, I think, is such an important word, this idea of balance, right? We've gotta find not only the chiaroscuro balance that you mentioned with light and dark or ping and velvety warmth, but we've also gotta find, especially with what we're talking about in the female voice, this chest head balance so that, very, very only in the extremes, let's say, there should really be an isolation of one or the other, right? Because we want it to be able to blend so that from top to bottom, it sounds like one seamless, beautiful range, as opposed
Mhm.
to driving an old VW Bug where you feel each gear shift into the next, thing.
Ooh,
So, whoo,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and it can, sometimes feel that way, and, obviously, that's not going to be appropriate across all repertoire,
sure.
and, if I'm singing more lyric repertoire, then I may not, need to invite more chest voice into it as I do when I'm singing more dramatic repertoire. Or another area where using a slightly heavier registration can be helpful is actually in oratorio. And so when I'm singing oratorio, particularly if I'm the alto, like say, Beethoven 9, where it can be really hard to hear the alto, I'm doing a lot more
My
of what I
friend
would call,
my
yeah.
friend and colleague Kelly O'Connor always says like, "Oh, that's just all about the dress." Anytime you do Beethoven 9, yeah, you'll never she's like, "It's all about the dress. You'll never get heard." So, but yeah,
Eh, I just really try to kind of more register it like a tenor. I
yeah,
just really think I try to think that I'm just an upper tenor in some of that.
yeah, yeah. The thicker the orchestration, the more of a challenge that poses, certainly.
Mhm.
And, let's say you talked a little bit about, vocal health and the ideas that you learned in the vocology certificate. Talk a little bit about how you balance getting back to that word, how you balance out the addition of chest voice. I mean, because what we're talking about is probably a heavier registration. Would you agree with that word? Or is it, I guess what I'm getting at is the other side of that balance has to be airspeed, right? Because if the airspeed gets too slow, that can cause somewhat of a slower vibrato, or it can cause well, it can cause a number of different things. But one of the things that you spoke about in the Nats thing was straw singing, and
Mm.
I loved what you said. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of straw singing and well how it helps in a number of different ways?
So it actually reduces what I guess we would say is tissue stress. So it helps bring the vocal folds together a little bit more cleanly. And then in addition, as your vocal folds are vibrating, if they were normally going to vibrate like this, straws actually have them vibrate more like this. So it lowers the amplitude or the excursion away from the midline of the vocal folds.
Okay.
And so this is actually beneficial to your little vocal fold tissues. Your vocal folds are only about as long as your thumbnail, so they're they're very busy little things there.
Mhm.
So it can reduce the impact stress. It also helps um, kind of square up the vocal folds vertically. So if this is the trachea and the air goes through the glottis. If you're in head voice, oh geez, if you're in head voice, then your vocal folds are kind of more coming together, at the edges of the mucosal layer. But as you are singing more, fully into your vocal folds, the straws actually help kind of square them up a little bit more, so you actually get better closure.
Mhm.
So that's another benefit. It's quiet, so if you're in a place where you really can't sing and you really can't warm up without getting, yelled at, then stick a couple of coffee straws in your mouth and go for it, because you're not going to, you're not going to disturb them as much.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
It's a great way to warm up in a hotel.
it also trains the very base of the throat, so it's the epilarynx. It helps kind of train that part of the pharynx to maintain a certain shape that is thought to emphasize higher harmonics in the spectrum of sound. So you get more ring, and it's more ring for less buck.
Mhm.
So lots of good things. Lots of good things.
I know that for me, I mean, if I'm practicing and I feel like, ugh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm putting too much weight in my sound. I feel like I'm over singing something. If I go back to the straw and just sing through the straw, and even if it's just 2 or 3 minutes of just singing the same phrase just through the straw, and then I take the straw away and start singing, it's like it's almost instantaneous how much benefit I can be relieved through this straw singing idea. And getting
Mhm.
back to what we were talking about with the registration stuff, I just wonder, have you thought about? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about it. But this is kind of a stupid question. I mean, but do you use that in an attempt to help smooth that transition?
That's a good question. Um, I'm not sure. I mean, other than I mean, I will sometimes work on it in a certain registration. You can actually, keep it in a chestier mix, or you can keep it in a headier
Hmm.
mix. The thing is that depending on the length of the straw, it's going to change those registration events because you're adding length to the vocal
Right, right.
tract. So it basically kind of moves your register shift
Hmm.
around. So I don't necessarily work on it for that specifically, but say I was having a hard time with a specific note in that kind of chest area. I mean, it's the same area that men struggle to,
Sure.
really. Um, then I would likely either hum it, sing through NG, some other occlusive exercise like a straw, or yeah, a
Yeah.
straw, and see if that helps take some of the stress off the stress off of it.
I'm just looking over at the comments. A little bit ago, Ashraf
Mhm.
Suelam, who was my first guest on this show, said no.
Yes, I
He
heard that
noticed your
one.
Vakai. He said, "And yay for getting someone who actually addresses support in detail and with hands-on approach." Yeah, talking about Kukuru, I'm sure. And Lisa Lowry
Yeah.
just came in, said, "Hey, speaking of singing in straws to be quiet, I've noticed lately practicing with my belt box is a little bit like that and has some of the benefits of
Mm,
straw phonation. Thanks for that great explanation of the benefits of straw phonation." The belt box,
great.
that's one of those masks that you wear that dampens the sound, right? Is that
I think so, yeah.
yeah? I've
I don't
never
I don't really know that much about it, but
yeah.
we'll
I
have
don't.
to look into that, huh, Weston?
Yes, we will. There are so many things that are coming about now to deal with singing in the COVID times, right? Um,
Mm,
I ordered one of those Broadway masks, or at least in the video it shows it a Broadway singer, but essentially looks like Howard the Duck, kind of on your face. So I'm interested in
yes.
seeing what that'll be like.
Yeah,
And
and I ordered the one from My Music Folders. I
yeah,
know the folks that produced that one, so I just decided to get that one. It's out of Missoula, Montana, so
yeah, I think that's the one I'm talking about. That's the one that I ordered from my music folders.
well, there is one that, out of New York, it's part of the I can't remember.
I don't know. I think I've ordered kind of a number of things to see which ones are truly beneficial, which ones work, which ones don't. Um, so we talked a brief moment about it at the beginning of this interview, but you and I have recently reunited in an attempt to find ways to improve this whole online teaching situation. Um,
Yes.
Talk a little bit about your findings in that and how you plan to move forward with your online instruction,
Mhm.
and what have you found to be really beneficial? What have you found that's not so helpful? Just so you can give some people some ideas.
Well, I think if you go to either of our Facebook profiles, not necessarily like the page that this is broadcasting from, but from our personal profiles,
Hmm.
you'll see some public posts that Weston and I both put up about our explorations the past few weeks, and we've done a lot of looking around at this technology, and the problem is just that it, there's so many options out there, and those options will work really really well uh, for one person and be absolutely ridiculous for another person. So I
Yeah,
think for me, it's always. I mean, this is how I also view using voice science. It's yes, it can be incredibly complicated, and I can find the most complicated approach to studying just about anything. But what I really want to be able to do is find something that that in maybe in theory is very complicated, but can actually be reduced to be fairly practical.
sure.
And so I think that's the value in the work that you and I have done together, and that a lot of people are doing uh, all across the country
Yeah.
right now. And so um, I will probably stick with Zoom for the most part, and then when possible, I will add clean feed, which is something that really helps, as we've discovered, to improve the quality and the latency, so the lag of the audio signal. And it's the sort of thing where you can, oh, one of my sweet peas is bringing me my cord. Thank
Because
you,
the girls
baby.
were ignoring you.
Because the girls were ignoring me. Somehow I thought my cord was up here and it wasn't. So wow, that was a very speedy response. So anyway, yeah, I think, Weston, I think you and I are on the same page with that, in
Yeah,
that, we recognize that, yeah, there are all these things we can be doing, but look for the least amount of technology, and the least headache. I think we're finding that Zoom plus, an
clean feed.
audio thing like clean feed is going to be the best solution. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
What
mean,
are your thoughts there?
no, I completely agree. I think it's very unrealistic, especially to expect a student to go spend $350 on an audio interface plus another 100 or $150 on a great microphone so that you can connect via XLR cable to the audio interface. And it
Right.
becomes, if what I just said sounds confusing, it can be even more so. Whereas if you just find yourself a pretty decent USB mic and you've got a decent pair of open back headphones, which like I'm using, right? They got
Yes.
the holes in the side. I
I
don't
have
even
those
notice.
exact same ones, Weston.
I know. I think
Imagine
somebody
that.
very intelligent um,
Yeah.
told
But
you
I've
about
even
them.
used I've even used my AirPods with clean feed, and it's usually fine too.
That's
So
good to know. So even
um
with Bluetooth, it's
yeah,
okay.
it's fine.
Yeah.
It may not be as reliable or as you know, as, I don't know. It's fine.
Well,
I
they
have
say that
time.
using a wired set of headphones even helps to decrease that latency or that lag. But, I think that it also, like we said, let's make this as simple and as straightforward and as easy as possible so that the students, um, literal student like at a university or just, student of singing, regardless of your age, doesn't have to, singing itself is complicated enough. We don't want to have to get you to have a degree in IT in order to make it all work. So I love what you
Well,
said.
the other problem is that can be, and especially I would say it's something I feel I need to be sensitive about here at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, because we are uh, we serve a very diverse population of students here, and I just don't want people to feel left out because they may not have all the bells and whistles that
Sure,
maybe someone who has more financial capital, um,
sure.
and so that can be very frustrating. If you think, well, what I'm getting is not going to be good, then they're not going to want to do it either. So they also have to believe in the experience that we're providing, and that even if the technology can sometimes be lacking, they're still going to get the very best that we have to offer in the moment.
Yeah. And
They have to believe in us in this at this time.
right, right. And I think as you have proven brilliantly this afternoon, that we haven't uttered a single note yet. And I think a lot of information has been passed back and forth that could be very helpful in one who is struggling with understanding, what support is or struggling with understanding registration or, so I think that there can be very, very effective and efficient voice lessons that happen where maybe we don't even need to sing. I mean, I think that eventually you got to put your money where your mouth is and be able to demonstrate or have the student be able to demonstrate what it is that they're talking about. But um, like I said, I think that as we move forward, until we get to a time where it is safe to sing in the same room together without wearing masks, um, we do have to adapt, which I think is important that we continue to seek out, the like you said, the easiest and sort of most straightforward and affordable I mean, that's the great thing about
Mhm.
Clean Feed. It's free. It's a free
Yeah,
service. Zoom,
yeah.
I mean, there is a paid version of Zoom, but if you don't have more than one person on, it's free. I've used Zoom quite a bit, and I've never paid for it. So, yeah, if we
Mhm.
can keep the cost down and keep the technology simple, I think it's great. Well, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and talking with us today about your experiences and struggles and challenges and aha moments. It's so
Oh, it's been
cool.
so much
Um,
fun. It's been really great
yeah,
to just, reconnecting with you this summer as, I know you're prepping to start a new academic post and we've been, working real hard to try and find some good solutions for our students and our
yeah.
colleagues and friends and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, in fact, after this, I'm gonna hop on with Dana Zenobi, who is
Oh yeah.
figuring out the whole sound jack thing. So I think it's oh, Christina Peer just said, "So great to see
Oh,
you,
hi
friends." Hi,
Christina.
Christina. So yeah, this has been great, and again, thank you so much for all that you contribute to this because it really is informative and helpful, and I know that I have benefited greatly from your advice and from your support. So I really appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you as well, Weston. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. All right, well, we'll wrap up here. Thank you so much for all that you tuned in, all of you who've tuned in, and it's always an exciting time under the hood. You just got to come and join us Fridays at 4, 5 Eastern, and we'll be here. We'll be here every Friday. So
2 o'clock Pacific
this is
for
true.
those of
I
you
should
that
I should
don't
not
live
forget my
all the
Pacific
way
and
over in New York.
my Las Vegas friends over on the Pacific Coast. Yeah, 2 p.m. That's great. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, and until next time. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.